One of the difficult experiences of suffering that a lot of couples deal with is the experience of infertility. So to shift from our discussion about these bioethical issues at the end of life to now turning how to steward life at its beginning, what do you think are some of the important concerns about IVF? Because a lot of people might assume that because it involves creating life, that it should be something that is permissible or ethically beneficial. But really, there's a lot of fraught issues with IVF.
Yeah, I think you're pointing out something that actually raises, that rises to the highest levels of our society, in the sense that even our President Trump, has framed this in that manner and said, well, we want to promote in vitro fertilization. Why do we want to promote it? Because he says this is a form of family building. So he's, using kind of a desirable thing, which is to have bigger families, more children. And then he's choosing a morally problematic means. He doesn't realize he's doing that. So what are the issues here? There are many significant issues, but I do have to say, there's this silver lining effect. I personally am grateful that the president has brought this up, because, for years I have been trying to kind of get people interested in talking about IVF. And I think most of the time people, this is a private issue. Couples are struggling with infertility. Let's not talk too much. Let's not make anybody uncomfortable by suggesting that doing this as a way to get a baby has moral concerns. And the fact that the president brought it up now means that people feel more ready to engage the issue. And I find I'm, even being invited much more to speak about it around the country than I have in the past. So, that's the silver lining. So the issue with in vitro fertilization, a lot of times Catholics, if you ask them, why does the church say it's wrong? A quick answer, you make extra embryos and you freeze them, and that's just terrible. Well, that actually is not the core reason. Even if you make 0 extra embryos and you freeze 0 embryos, the very act of creating that life in laboratory glassware, outside the love and affection of the marital embrace, you are committing an act of injustice against your own child, and you are violating the meaning of your marital covenant, right at its root and core, and its fundamental design from the Lord. So this stands at the heart of the issue, and people don't see it. They're like, well, but look, if I do in vitro, I'm just giving my sex cells to somebody down the street, and I'm paying him some money to do this for me. But they don't realize this has become transactional in the way that we now are producing our offspring. Transactional, where we're controlling the whole dynamic. And when we control it, what happens? You create a subclass. There's the subjugation of your own offspring that invariably occurs, because you have those who are brought into being at the level of all of us in the sense of the marital embrace, but then you have the subclass, those who are manufactured, manhandled, manipulated, flash frozen, handed over to embryonic stem cell researchers, those who are products to be treated by a different metric. And this is automatic injustice. So, the church is very insistent and has become, I'm convinced, largely the lone voice in our culture today, insisting that this should never be done under any conditions, any circumstances whatsoever. The desire is good for children, for offspring, but this does not open up to us the allowance to do anything that we want to go after a good end. This is a means and ends issue. The ends are good, the means are flawed and fundamentally disordered, and gravely so. I use that language to remind Catholics in particular, but all men of goodwill, that when you do this, you have crossed a fundamental line. And certainly for a believer, this is a matter that requires that you go to confession. If you did it with full knowledge, freedom of the will and so on, full consent, this is grave matter that requires you find healing with the Lord. And of course, He wants to forgive us, when we make these mistakes. But I think we've become so casual about this that many Catholics are like, oh, this isn't even something that raises any sinful concerns. And in fact, it's very grave matter that they are dealing with.
And I think one of the major underlying issues is a misunderstanding of the vocation of parenthood, rather than viewing it as a gift, as viewing it as something that's simply conferred by one's own will, that the desire for parenthood alone should justify the means that someone takes in order to become a parent.
Yes, I think you're right about that. It's a sense of, well, I'm entitled to be a parent. I got married. I'm entitled to a child. I have a right to a child. Sometimes you hear that language, and it's like, oh dear, no, you never have a right to a child. A child is not a piece of property that you can lay claim to. What is it that we do have a right to when we get married? To those acts that are ordered and disposed to the handing on of the gift of life, those fruitful acts. But you're never entitled to a baby. So, I like to say to people that the beauty of the way God has set it up, the marital act is a mysterious kind of petitioning of the giver of the gift. And we have to, sure, do the petitioning, but He is the giver. And it may be part of His plan either to delay, maybe significantly delay the arrival of that first child, or in some cases there may be what we call irresolvable infertility. And the couple is being invited by the Lord to discover new ways of fruitfulness, whether it's big brother, big sister in the community, whether it's adoption, whether it's foster parenting. These things are authentic manifestations of that male-female complementarity and fruitfulness. So we've got to learn to help people. We've got to help people to learn to think outside the box a bit here and to realize at the end of the day, God always has a plan for your marriage. And if at the beginning it appears that there, is some difficulties, you've got to start by seeing, can you work around whatever the roadblock is? Is there a blocked fallopian tube? We could do a surgery. Is there a problem with the cycling of the woman? Is the man's sperm count too low? Are there erectile issues? Work through all of those. And a lot of times the Lord will send His blessing, but just in a time frame that maybe we were hoping it would be sooner. And it's like, no, God has His timing too. Or we may be in that situation of the irresolvable infertility again, and trusting in what the Holy Spirit is doing in marriages.
Which can be another problem of assisted reproductive technologies, is that they overlook these fundamental underlying medical conditions that can be leading to infertility, which is one of the reasons why natural procreative technologies can be really helpful in trying to address those underlying problems and assist the couple in achieving health.
Precisely. That point is an important one. And I sometimes stress to people, the way we talk about in vitro fertilization a lot of times is we say, well, you're apparently infertile. Why don't you overcome your infertility by doing IVF? Oh, yeah, okay. And it's like, flawed reasoning, because that couple, let's say the couple has irresolvable infertility, they do IVF, they pay to have the baby made, it's implanted into her, the baby is born. They are just as infertile at the end of the process as they were at the beginning. They have done a complete substitution of an entirely different kind of act for the marital act. The infertility remains. The underlying causes, as you're saying, have not been addressed. And so this is, again, a kind of misnomer at a minimum, a misconception, really, that people have about IVF being a treatment for infertility. No, it's an alternative way of engendering life in a laboratory that has very little to do with the life of the married couple.
We hope you enjoyed the Benedictine Dialogues, a production of Benedictine College in Atchison, Kansas. To catch all the latest and support our growing platform, visit media.benedictine.edu. And be sure to recommend this show to your friends and family. Help us to transform culture in America, one conversation at a time.